Walked into the room like she had every right to be there. That's the thing about my sister. She never needed an invitation. She never waited to be wanted. She just appeared, heels clicking on marble, perfume arriving 3 seconds before she did, and immediately started rearranging whatever space she stepped into. People, furniture, air, it didn't matter. Everything bent around her, or she made sure it did. I should have known she'd come. I should have known, because this was the best day of my life, and in 31 years, my sister had never once let me have one of those without making it about her. My name is Elise Harmon. I'm a federal prosecutor for the Southern District of New York. That morning of the reception, I was 31 years old, and I had just been appointed to lead the organized crime task force, the youngest person in the office's history to hold the position, the first woman. It had taken me 8 years to get there, 8 years of 90-hour weeks, of skipped holidays and canceled plans, of sitting in windowless rooms reviewing wire transcripts at 2 a.m. while my sister posted photos from wine bars in Charleston. 8 years of my mother asking me every Thanksgiving when I was going to slow down, "You're going to miss your life, Elise." As if my life wasn't the work. As if the work wasn't the whole point. I won't pretend my childhood was simple. Our father left when I was 9 and my sister Camille was 14. He didn't leave dramatically, he just stopped coming home. One night he was at dinner and then gradually he wasn't. And then one day my mother sat us down and told us he'd moved to Phoenix with someone named Denise. Camille cried. I went to my room and read. That was the year I decided I would never need anyone to stay. I would build something no one could take from me. Camille decided something different. She decided that attention was the only currency worth having, and she was very, very good at collecting it. She was beautiful in a way that made rooms go quiet. Dark hair, green eyes, the kind of cheekbones that made people stop mid-sentence. Growing up, I spent a lot of time being told I looked just like her, and then the sentence would trail off into something kind, which was somehow worse than if they just finished it. I was the studious one, the serious one. The one who was going places, which adults always said as a compliment, and which always felt, underneath it, like a gentle way of saying I wasn't quite here yet. Camille never went anywhere, technically. She stayed in our hometown outside Richmond, married at 26, divorced at 29, and spent most of her 30s in what she called figuring things out, which as far as I could tell meant brunch and real estate listings and calling our mother to talk about me. We weren't close. We were family, which is different. The reception was held in the main atrium of the federal courthouse on Pearl Street. 40-foot ceilings, marble floors, the kind of room that makes you feel, just by standing in it, that what happens here matters. My supervisor, Deputy Chief Watts, had arranged it, a formal reception with the department heads, some city officials, and colleagues I'd worked alongside for years. There was a small podium, a framed commendation behind it. A photographer from the office communications team. I had told my mother, and my mother, I should have expected this, had told Camille. I hadn't invited her. I want to be clear about that. It wasn't an oversight. Camille and I had not spoken since the previous Christmas, when she'd cornered me in our mother's kitchen and told me, in a voice that was carefully quiet so no one else could hear, that I had always made her feel invisible, that I thought I was better than everyone in this family, that my obsession with work was just a way of running from real life, and that one day I'd wake up alone in some office and realize I'd wasted everything that actually mattered. I had washed the coffee mug in my hand and told her I had an early morning. I hadn't cried until I was in my rental car, on I-95, 40 miles from Richmond. I didn't invite her, but she came. I saw her before she saw me. She was standing near the beverage table, talking to someone from the mayor's office, a deputy commissioner I'd worked with on 2 task force cases. She was laughing at something he said, her hand on his arm, and I felt that old familiar tightening in my chest. Not quite anger, not quite sadness. something between the two that I didn't have a good word for. I considered pretending I hadn't seen her. I actually turned slightly as if I could redirect myself toward the other side of the room. But she looked up, and our eyes met, and she smiled, that wide, warm, completely effortless smile that she deployed like a weapon, and walked toward me. Elise, she hugged me. She smelled like jasmine and white wine. This is incredible. I'm so proud of you. I hugged her back because there were 50 people in the room and a photographer. I didn't know you were coming, I said. Mom told me. You don't mind, do you? She pulled back and looked at me, and there was something in her expression. Something that was almost a challenge, dressed up as warmth. You know I wouldn't miss this. You've missed everything else, I thought. But I said, of course. For a while, it was fine. I circulated. I shook hands. Deputy Chief Watts introduced me with words that made my eyes sting. Things about tenacity and integrity, and the kind of patience that only comes from believing in what you're doing. I thought about my father leaving and me going to my room to read, and I thought maybe that stubbornness had been worth something after all. Then they called me to the podium. I was 2 sentences into my remarks. I had notes. I'd practiced. I knew exactly what I wanted to say when I heard the voice. She almost didn't make it here, you know. Not loud, just loud enough, the way Camille always said things she wanted people to hear, with just enough volume to be deniable. I stopped. Several people looked toward her. She was standing to the left of the podium, near a pillar, and she had that expression on her face, the one I'd known since we were children, the small, regretful smile of someone about to say something they claimed not to want to say. I'm sorry. She held up one hand as if someone had asked her to continue. I've watched her work so hard. I worry about her. She gave up a lot to be here. The room was quiet, not the good kind of quiet, the suspended kind, where everyone is waiting to see what happens next. I looked at her, she looked at me. There was a situation, she said to no one and everyone. A few years ago, something that almost ended her career. A complaint. I don't want to get into it. I just think people should know that Elise didn't just walk into this position. She fought through some things. A pause. Some of which were her own doing. My hand tightened around the podium. There had been a complaint. 5 years ago, a defense attorney had filed a misconduct allegation against me, frivolous, retaliatory, filed after I'd won a racketeering case against his client. It had been reviewed, dismissed, and expunged from my record within 4 months. It was nothing. It was less than nothing. It was the kind of thing that happened in high-stakes federal prosecution, and every senior attorney in that room either knew about it or had experienced something similar. But Camille knew about it because our mother had told her in confidence when I'd been too exhausted and too frightened to keep it entirely to myself. And now she was standing in the atrium of the federal courthouse at my reception, implying to 50 people, including city officials and my supervisors, that my appointment came with an asterisk. I didn't speak. I couldn't for a moment. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I was afraid of what would come out if I started. Camille, I said finally. My voice was very steady. I was proud of it. This isn't the moment. I know. She shook her head slightly as if scolding herself. I just love you. I want people to see the whole picture. The whole picture. As if she had one. As if she had spent a single day of her life in a room like this one, making the kind of decisions that kept her up at night. I was about to respond. I don't know what I would have said, something measured, something that would preserve the dignity of the moment, when I heard footsteps behind me, measured, deliberate, the kind of footsteps that have somewhere important to be and already know how to get there, and then a voice. I'd like to add something to the picture, if I may. I turned. He was standing at the edge of the podium area, Judge Harlan Corby. Associate Justice of the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, 62 years old, silver-haired, with the particular kind of stillness that comes from 30 years of being the most important person in any room he walked into. He had been at the reception for less than 10 minutes. I hadn't even had a chance to speak with him. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Camille. "You were describing a complaint from 2019, he said. Quiet, completely unhurried. "A retaliatory filing by counsel for the Marchetti organization. I know about it because I was on the panel that reviewed the expedited appeal. We dismissed it unanimously. In 12 years on the Second Circuit, I have seen perhaps 4 or 5 prosecutors with Ms. Harmon's combination of case construction and courtroom restraint." He paused. "She is, in my professional view, exactly the right person for this appointment. I don't believe she needs her record explained by someone who wasn't in the room." The atrium was completely silent. Camille's expression had gone through about 6 different versions of itself in the space of those sentences, starting with surprise, moving through something that looked like wounded dignity, and landing finally on a careful blankness that I recognized as her trying to figure out what her next move was. She didn't have one. She started. "Thank you," the judge said, pleasantly, as if she'd finished a thought. He turned to me. "Miss Harmon, congratulations. It's well deserved." 2 of the court officers who'd been stationed near the entrance had moved, subtly but unmistakably, to stand near Camille. Deputy Chief Watts appeared at her elbow. I don't know exactly what was said. The room noise had picked back up carefully the way it does when people decide in unison to give someone an exit. But within 5 minutes, my sister was gone. I stood at the podium, hands on either side of the lectern, and breathed. After, someone asked me how I knew Judge Corby. I didn't really. Not personally. We had exchanged perhaps 40 words at a judicial conference 2 years earlier. He had read a brief I'd submitted on digital evidence admissibility and sent a 3-sentence note through the clerk's office saying he found my argument well constructed. I had printed it out and kept it in my desk drawer. That was the extent of it, but he had come to the reception because Deputy Chief Watts had invited him, and he had stayed because he'd seen what was happening, and he had spoken because that was who he was, someone who had spent decades deciding what was true and what wasn't, and who did not tolerate a deliberate misrepresentation in a room full of people who deserved better. He didn't do it for me, not exactly. He did it because it was accurate. Because the record was the record, and the record was his domain. That distinction mattered to me more than I can explain. He didn't rescue me. He corrected the ledger. Those are different things. I called my mother that night from my apartment. She answered on the second ring, which meant she'd been waiting. She knew. Of course she knew. Camille had probably called her from the Uber. "She didn't mean to hurt you," my mother said, before I'd even gotten through the first sentence. I sat down on my kitchen floor. I don't know why the floor, something about it felt honest, I think. Less performative than the couch. "Mom," I said. She stood at my podium and told 50 federal employees that my career has an asterisk. She said she was proud of you. She said I almost didn't make it. At my appointment reception, in front of my supervisors. Silence. "She's had a hard year," my mother said, finally. I thought about the hard years I'd had, the missed holidays, the complaint I hadn't told anyone about for 3 weeks because I was afraid, genuinely afraid, that it would end everything I'd built. The night I sat in the same apartment and made myself eat dinner even though I wasn't hungry, because I'd read once that you had to take care of the basics when everything else was falling apart. The small, unglamorous discipline of surviving difficult years without asking anyone to notice. "I know she has," I said. "I love her. But I can't keep doing this." "Doing what?" "Letting her do this." There was a long pause. Then my mother said, quietly, "I didn't know it was this bad." "I know," I said. "I know you didn't." We talked for another hour. It was the most honest conversation I'd had with my mother in 10 years. She cried. I didn't. Not then. I sat on my kitchen floor and felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not anger, not relief, but a quiet, exhausted clarity. Like a window opening in a room that had been closed for too long. I didn't file a complaint against Camille. People in the comments of my life, if my life had comments, would say I should have. Maybe they're right. She had walked into a federal facility without authorization for a private professional event, made defamatory implications in front of my colleagues, and caused a significant disruption. There were options. There were always options. But I made a choice. Not from weakness, I want to be clear about that, but from a very specific calculation. I had spent 8 years building a reputation based on precision and restraint. I was not going to let my sister be the thing that made me lose my composure in a way that people would remember. The story I wanted told about me was not, prosecutor has public family breakdown. The story I'd already written. Quietly, patiently, case by case, was better than anything a courtroom confrontation with Camille would produce. So I let the judge's words stand as the record. And I moved on. What I didn't expect was the letter. 3 weeks later, a handwritten note arrived at my office. Cream envelope, no return address, a Richmond postmark. Inside, in Camille's handwriting. I'd have known it anywhere. She still writes her lowercase e's, the way she did in middle school. 6 sentences. She said she hadn't known the complaint had been dismissed. She said she'd thought, all these years, that I had been protected by the office and that the whole thing had been quietly buried the way things sometimes got buried for people with connections. She said she realized, reading my face at the podium, that she'd had it wrong. She said she was sorry. She said she didn't know how to fix it, and she wasn't sure she deserved the chance to try, but she was sorry. She signed it with just her name. No love, Camille. No heart. Just Camille. I read it twice. Then I put it in my desk drawer, next to the judge's note from 2 years ago. I haven't responded yet. I'm not sure I will. I'm not sure I won't. There's a version of this where I pick up the phone in 6 months, or a year, and we try, really try to figure out who we are to each other when we're not performing for our mother, or competing for some invisible prize neither of us ever agreed to play for. There's another version where I just let the distance do its work. What I know is this, I don't need to decide right now. That's new for me. I've spent my whole life running the timeline on everything. Deadlines, case schedules, career benchmarks. Letting something sit in the uncertainty without forcing a resolution feels unfamiliar in a way that is also, strangely, like breathing. The task force has 17 active cases. I'm in the office by 7 most mornings. I make my coffee at the corner place on Chambers Street. Medium dark roast, no sugar. And I walk the 6 blocks to the courthouse and I think about the work. Just the work. Not my father in Phoenix. Not Camille in Richmond. Not the version of myself I was trying to prove existed to everyone who looked at me and saw something almost. Just the case in front of me. The evidence. The argument. The truth, as best as I can find it. That's always been enough. It still is. The judge sent another note last month, a different brief, a Fourth Amendment issue I'd raised in a suppression hearing. 3 sentences, through the clerk's office, same as before. He said the argument was sound. He said he hoped I was well. I printed it out, put it in the drawer. I didn't win a war. I didn't vanquish anyone. I just showed up, did the work, and let the record speak, which is, I've come to understand, the only kind of winning that actually lasts. My sister walked into a room she wasn't invited to, and the room already knew who I was. That's the whole story. That's enough. I've thought a lot about what Camille actually wanted that day. Not what she said she wanted. She said she was proud of me. She said she loved me. She said she just wanted people to see the whole picture. But what she actually wanted, underneath all of that, I think she wanted to matter in a room where she didn't. I think she'd spent so long watching me build something she couldn't touch, couldn't follow, couldn't take credit for, that she found the one crack she knew about, a difficult chapter I'd survived, and she tried to use it to make herself relevant, to make herself the person who knew something the room didn't. The thing about that strategy is that it only works when the truth isn't already in the room. Judge Corby wasn't some miracle. He wasn't luck. He was the direct result of 8 years of work that had touched enough people in enough places that when the moment came, someone who knew the actual record was standing 20 feet away. That's not fortune. That's the long, slow accumulation of doing things right when nobody was watching, and then one day someone who was watching steps forward. I used to think that patience was passive, that waiting was a kind of giving up. I was wrong. Patience, when it's built on real work, is the most aggressive thing a person can do. It says, I don't need to win this moment. I'm building something that will still be standing when this moment is long over. Camille made a choice at that podium, and so did I. I made it before she even walked in every day for 8 years, in windowless offices and late-night case reviews, and small, unglamorous decisions to do the right thing when the easier thing was right there. Those choices compounded. They built a reputation that one afternoon of my sister's worst behavior couldn't undo. That's the part I want to sit with, because I think it matters more than the drama of what happened. Integrity is not a single decision, it's the sum of all the small ones, and the reason Camille's words didn't land, the reason the room already knew who I was, is because I had been telling the truth about myself through my work for years before she showed up to tell a different story. I don't think she's a villain. I think she's someone who never found her own version of that, her own work, her own record, her own thing that was entirely hers, and that's genuinely sad. I can hold that sadness and still refuse to let her walk into my life and rewrite it. Her letter is still in my drawer. I look at it sometimes. I haven't decided what to do with it, and I've made peace with not deciding yet. Some things don't need a verdict right away. What I know is this. I showed up. I did the work. I let the record speak, and when someone tried to rewrite it in public, the truth was already loud enough to answer for itself. That's all any of us can really do. Build something true, protect it quietly, and trust that what's real doesn't need defending. It just needs time.